since 2015, Israel has been striking known Iranian targets in Syria.
This is Russian territory. We're going to take this back, right?
Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention does not prohibit Israel from settling the Golan Heights.
This is the Israel Guys.
Welcome to the Israel Guys, where we believe that in a world of fake news, you should connect to the true and authentic stories from Israel. Israel's providing humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, but avoiding a full confrontation with Russia. How long can they hold out before Russia decides to make trouble for Israel with Iranian targets in Syria? And yes, they are very interested in those things. Guys, you should subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that notification bell, get the conversation going down in the comments below, and share this program with someone that you know would appreciate it and be interested in it. Go ahead and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to. And always remember to go to theisraelguys.com to check out all of the content that we put out every single day. Guys, quick note before we jump into today's program, and that is that Josh and I will be in the United States from March 7th to April 5th, and we would love to come and speak at your church or your congregation or your fellowship or your event, whatever it may be. You can send us an email at hello@theisraelguys.com if you're interested in having us come and speak. We have very limited time in our schedules. I think Josh is actually more booked up than I am, but we would if it's at all possible, we'd love to come speak to your church or your congregation in the U.S. We'll be there from March 7th to April 5th. Send us an email. We'll have it down in the description below so you can copy and paste it. hello@theisraelguys.com. We would love to get in touch with you guys.
Also, Israel's borders are open, and you should come to Israel soon as possible.
That's right.
Big news.
And we're putting trips together.
Yeah, we got trips going on.
Serveisrael.com. Go check it out right now. We would love to have you guys join us. Registration will be open in a few days in the next week for sure. But you go check out our trips that we're putting together at serveisrael.com right now.
Guys, what is going on with Russia, and how is that affecting Israel? That's what we're going to...
And Ukraine.
And Ukraine, yeah, exactly. I mean, there's and let's just add Syria to that, and the Golan Heights.
Iran.
I'm telling you, there is a massive situation that is affecting a lot more than just what you're seeing on the news, and we're going to bring that to you right now. We're going to talk about how this is affecting Israel, specifically in the Golan Heights. And the fact is that we're really guessing a lot at what's going on in the Golan Heights. There's just movement there, and we're going, what is going on? What's happening? Why is there 10,000 Russian troops in Syria on the Golan Heights, and why are they doing drills together? We're going to break this down. What's going on?
Guys,
first
you know
off, Israel's very supportive of Ukraine.
Right.
That's what we're going to.
You guys know what's happening with Ukraine. We've been praying for the people of Ukraine. Christians in Ukraine, Jews in Ukraine every single day, obviously praying for their protection. Israel is already pledged 100 tons of humanitarian aid, and it's already en route to Ukraine to assist the fleeing refugees. They're saying, I think, like several million. They're expecting several million refugees to be fleeing, a lot of them fleeing to Poland. Israel is showing a lot of solidarity with Ukraine. Josh, did you know some Israelis are actually signing up to go fight in Ukraine against Russia?
Well, every Israeli is basically if they're an 18-year-old guy, they went to the military service. So you've got a nation full of soldiers when it relates to Israel. So basically everybody is ready to go. If they're going to go serve and fight with the Ukrainians, they've already got their training. So I know that was out there and that some Israelis were taking up on that.
I'm not sure if they made it yet, but I know they're trying for sure. Israel has also set up humanitarian medical services as well on the Poland-Ukraine border, and also the Jewish Agency has set up a lot of basically aliyah stations, but they're there to help Jewish refugees, and if they want to come to Israel, they have a flight waiting for them. They're going to get them all the way to Israel. I believe there's already been something like 2,500 Jews that are coming to Israel, and they're expecting at least 10,000. There's over 200,000 Jews in Ukraine, so it could be a massive wave of aliyah. So pray for that. Pray that the Jewish people would take this event in history to go ahead and come to Israel, because Israel has open arms, and they say that over and over. If you're a Jew anywhere in the world, you can come to Israel. Our doors are open. And if you're watching and you're Jewish, then think about making aliyah to Israel. This is your national homeland.
There's one big, huge thing that we have to mention here, Luke, and this is different than any other attack in history, is that there's actually a homeland for the Jews. And centuries past now, the Jews have been targeted and oppressed, killed, destroyed, and now there's a massive change in the world. There is a state of Israel.
There's a
safe
refuge,
place,
a place to flee to
for Jewish people to flee to. That is massive. There's a homeland for the Jewish people. So, can you imagine what the Ukrainian Jews, what it would be like if there was no Israel for them to come to? There's a safe place for every Jewish person in the world, and there's only really one safe place for every Jewish person in the world, and that needs to be made very clear. That is the nation of Israel.
Right.
That's a modern-day miracle.
Josh, we have to get into Israel's tricky relationship and status in the world and all of this because, and we'll get into actual statements from the prime minister and different diplomats here in Israel, but they're being really careful in what they say about Russia and Ukraine. And we're going to get into the reason why first. The reason, or one of the big reasons, is that, and you have to put all this together, okay? So pay attention here. Iran's biggest proxy in the world is Hezbollah, located in Syria, right? And Iran has been arming Hezbollah, and basically they're obviously Iran wants to build a nuclear weapon and they wipe out Israel. They've said that publicly. They want to wipe out Israel and America. But in the meantime, they're building up proxies all over the world. But they're trying to focus on Israel. They're trying to infiltrate Israel. There's rumors that, there's like Iranian agents in Judea and Samaria and probably Gaza already. But for sure we know that they're arming Hezbollah in Syria. So since 2015, Israel has been striking known Iranian targets in Syria. But here's the kicker. Russia has 10,000 troops in Syria. But Israel they have cooperated with Israel so that when Israel strikes...
I don't know if cooperation is the right word. They've closed their eyes. They've been
turned a blind eye.
We're not looking. We don't want a war. We don't want to fight Israel.
Right, yeah. So basically you have Iran... Iranian-backed Hezbollah in Syria that wants to attack Israel. So Israel strikes these Iranian targets first. 10,000 Russian troops in Syria. They've turned a blind eye to Israel's airstrikes against these Iranian targets.
They've turned a blind eye, and they've also allowed it. Because if Russia didn't allow Israel to take out these proxies coming from Iran, these missiles shipments and whatever, all these weapons that are coming, if they had a problem with it, they could stop it. We're talking about Iran here. This is one of the world's largest militaries on the planet. We're talking about a massive force, and that Israel is literally playing a game with right now of what are they thinking, what's going to happen here on the border. And the bad news is that Iran is kind of, Russia is saying, we're not so sure we like you to keep doing this. So now what's going to happen? Now, this whole big thing, guys, I'm telling you, let's not just keep looking at Russia. We need to look at Russia, what's going on. But the fact is that Iran, for Israel's sake, guys, this is a dangerous thing. Iran is already working with Russia is already working with Iran proxies in Syria, and now they're not so happy with Israel taking out that proxy. This could lead to some really dangerous situation, a very dangerous situation for the nation of Israel. Israel right now is acting like they're not so concerned about it. They're they're not wanting to touch.
Except
the
it's
button.
Clear though that they're being really careful not to
very careful
not to crack down on Russia.
They're focusing their attention mostly on one, helping the Ukrainians, and two, bashing Iran. They're not wanting to really make that a clear focus that Iran, Russia, a bit of alliance there could potentially be some bad news. They're not even going there at this point. So we really need to be watching this to be careful that we're really supporting Israel and praying for Israel at this time with that potential danger right on Israel's border in Syria.
Mm-hmm. And also, Russia has kind of started, it seems like they're going to start coming out more against Israel on a diplomatic level more in the future. They've already said that they do not recognize Israel's sovereignty on the Golan Heights.
Right. And
they've declared that the Golan Heights belong to Syria because one of the big reasons that Russia is in Syria is to support Bashar al-Assad in his civil war in Syria. And that, I think, from what I understand, Russia is one of the main reasons that Assad is actually still in control in Syria and that he didn't end up losing the civil war. Right. So now Russia, that's a pretty big deal, especially when the Golan Heights has been in Israel's hands since 1967. It's been annexed and it's been a sovereign part of Israel since, I believe, 1981. And the United States recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights during President Trump's time in office. So now Russia, one of the world powers, coming out and saying that they do not recognize Israel's sovereignty on the Golan Heights. That's a pretty big deal.
Well, and to couple that with they have 10,000 troops on the border of the Golan, where America, as of I don't think they really have any troops left in Syria. I think that maybe I saw latest
Maybe a few,
2021 they had 900 troops, and I think Biden has mostly pulled a lot of those out. So I don't like American presence in Syria is very limited at this point compared to Russian presence in Syria on Israel's border. That really brings a red flag when you say, wait. And it almost sounds familiar to what's going on in Ukraine, where they're saying, actually, this is Russian territory. We're going to take this back, right? Well, they could say easily, hey, we've got our Syrian, we're allied with the Syrians there, and we don't recognize Israel's rights to the Golan Heights. This is Syria's land. That literally said, this belongs to Syria. This is the Russian delegation said that in the UN. This belongs to Syria. So they could make the same political thing that they're doing now in Ukraine and just act like, no, we're just bringing it back to the way it's supposed to be. That's dangerous reality that's sitting on the border of Israel right now. We need to be aware of that.
Okay, a couple of tweets from the Russian mission to the UN concerning the Golan Heights. They said, quote, "We're concerned over Tel Aviv's announced plans for expanding settlement activity in the occupied Golan Heights, which contradicts the provisions of the 1949 Geneva Convention. Russia does not recognize Israel's sovereignty over Golan Heights that are part of Syria." They're referring to Israel recently announced plans to really put a lot of effort into settling the Golan Heights, including thousands and thousands of new homes, encouraging farmers to go start agriculture there. So, by the way, we can't get into it, but Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention does not prohibit Israel from settling the Golan Heights.
No.
It says the occupying power shall not deport or transfer parts of its own civilian population into the territory it occupies. Guys, just go back to 1920 British mandate. British mandate which is still in legal effect, by the way, because the Article 80 of the UN Charter calls for previous mandates to still have legal and binding effect. And basically, the original British mandate called for settlement in the Golan Heights. Okay.
And also, Luke, you got to say that
level.
you can't call, like, the whole international world calls Israel the occupier. Guys, no other nation in the world's ever had a capital in any of the land that is Israel. No one has ever actually been awarded that from the international community to say that they ever had anything to do with it. They never had legal presence here in the land. So to say that Israel's occupying land that was never officially occupied by any other nation in the world, recognized internationally, occupied, like it just never happened. Israel cannot occupy that land. It's just a really fabricated argument that the world and the powers that are so anti-Israel continue to propagate such a horrendous lie. So literally,
okay, a couple more tweets from the Russian mission to the UN. They say, quote, "In addition, we're concerned about Israel's plans to expand settlement activity in the occupied Golan Heights. We emphasize the unchanging position on the non-recognition of Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, which are an integral part of Syria."
Integral part of Syria. Can I tell you what kind of integral part it is? Actually,
did you know Syria threatened to basically murder all the Druze that live on the Syrian border there, opposite of Israel on the Golan Heights?
And if you know anything about Israel, you know that there's a Sea of Galilee. It's a very popular place. You should know about this. Do you know before Israel took that area in 1967, do you know that the Syrians would sit up there and just machine gun down into the Galilee?
Yep.
Like the whole of Tiberias, like they had to have all the farmers around that area had to have tractors with like iron casings around them just so the Syrians wouldn't murder every person in the Tiberias region. That's a problem. And if you want to talk about an integral part of any country, it's an integral part of the security of the
mountain region
of Israel.
Yeah.
There's
Golan Heights,
no possible way. You're destroying the nation of Israel if you give up the Golan.
Russian mission to the UN, by the way, couldn't resist just throwing in one more thing there. They said of growing concern is the recent increase in attacks by settlers, as well as the disproportionate use of force by Israeli military personnel against Palestinians, which leads to numerous deaths and injuries among civilians. So they were just like, while we're at it, we might as well just throw that in there too.
You know what's outrageous is, Luke, is
we're telling one lie,
this.
We might as well tell two.
They're literally saying this as they're taking over
Ukraine.
The Ukraine.
Yeah.
This is coming out of these are all these tweets we just read. That's recent tweets. They're saying this like as they're marching into Ukraine. They're condemning Israel. What? And they're condemning so-called settler violence. Like, I mean, really, that's really outrageous that you're going to go that far.
Okay.
And that you're so misinformed. I mean, really, that's
Right.
really misinformation that you're bringing to the world there. And obviously, that's just a little bit of the misinformation that's obviously going on the Russian side right now. We talk about misinformation.
So now that
There's tons of that.
you know about Israel's complicated relationship with Russia, these statements are going to make a little more sense, okay? Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett made a really careful statement. He didn't even mention Russia at all. Like, he didn't even say the name Russia. He said, quote, "The world order as we know it is changing. The world is much less stable, and our region too is changing every day. These are difficult, tragic times. Our hearts are with the civilians of eastern Ukraine who are caught up in this situation." So, and once you hear this other statement by Israel's foreign minister, you realize they carefully crafted this. Israel's foreign minister, YAIR LAPID, said, quote, "The Russian attack on Ukraine is a serious violation of the international order. Israel condemns that attack and is ready and prepared to offer humanitarian assistance to Ukrainian citizens." And then also later, LAPID stated that Israel would support the UN General Assembly's resolution to condemn Russia for their invasion into Ukraine. He said, quote, "Israel was and will be on the right side of history." So the background, and according to news here in Israel, is that the prime minister and the foreign minister worked really well, worked on this together ahead of time so that the prime minister wouldn't say anything against Russia, and he'd be very careful to make sure he was just, offering humanitarian assistance and saying we're there for the Ukrainian people. And then the foreign minister basically came out and said that Russia was wrong, in no uncertain terms. And then they also backed. By the way, I was thinking, is this like the first time Israel has the opportunity to back a UN resolution against somebody other than themselves?
Yeah, right.
And then the finance minister, AVIGDOR LIBERMAN, he took a similar tack as the prime minister. He said, quote, "The smartest thing we can do is to keep a low profile," stressing that Israel had to prioritize protecting Jews in both Russia and Ukraine, which is another point of Israel's kind of conflicting interests. Is that Israel they want to be responsible for keeping as many Jews around the world safe as they possibly can. And there's a lot of Jews in Ukraine, and there's a lot of Jews still in Russia.
There's one aspect that I want to bring out really quickly because I think this could also affect Israel. I think it's a far out there kind of view, but I want to bring it up because it also is part of this. There is a religious aspect to this thing, and who knows how much that actually weighs into it or not. Putin obviously has very Christian background. They say he wears a cross around his neck. They say he's, Russian Orthodox. Most people would assume.
People also said that Hitler was a Christian.
No,
too.
and I would.
And he said he was a Christian.
I would
too.
actually. You could possibly relate.
We're not saying that for sure.
These ideas saying that he's using this to garner support.
Right.
That's fairly obvious.
He's definitely not a Christian. But there's a lot of people that call themselves
But supposedly
Christians
the
that are not.
backstory is that Kiev had a lot to do with the foundings and the beginnings and the old folklore of going on 1,000 years ago of the building of Russia. And, he wants to bring all that back in. But it has a lot to do with Eastern Orthodox and the Russian Orthodox churches. And just actually 3 years ago, Kiev broke off, Ukraine broke off from the Russian Orthodox. And so it's added some tension there on what's going on there. So he wants to bring back in Kiev as this ancient holy site to
Part
Russia.
of the Russian Orthodox Church, basically.
When I heard that, I couldn't help but think, okay, there's other cities around the world that are also holy to Christians. And if he's going to Kiev, I mean, there's a thought, Jerusalem is also one of these. How far will this wild maniac go? Like, that's literally what the question is.
Well,
and
right.
That's
And
where
then-
we stand with Ukraine, because Ukraine is literally fighting right now.
And the big question is, if he conquers Ukraine, then what country
What's
is
next? And that's really the question of what's going on in the Golan Heights. And that's where we're bringing this together is, does he have a next step? And I'm sure, guys, obviously he has a next step in mind. I mean, if we're correct at all in our assumptions, the goal is Russia wants
They want to be
take
a
over the
world
world.
superpower, and I would guess they probably want to bring back the rise, the age of the Soviet Union.
And
they want to
more.
make Russia one of the great superpowers of the world.
So to minimize, to say that it doesn't have religious pieces to it, I would be a little bit far fetched. I think that there obviously is religious pieces. He's trying to garner support within the Russian church, and that this could have a little bit to do with eventually what does Jerusalem play in this, and what will that involvement be? That's something else to watch out for.
So obviously, as Josh said, we support the country and the people of Ukraine. Especially, we're Christian Zionists. We're believers in the Bible, so we definitely support and pray for the Christians and the church in Ukraine, but also the Jewish people. There's more than 200,000 Jews in Ukraine. Israel has offered to bring all of them to Israel. Like if 200,000 Jews said they wanted to make aliyah tomorrow, Israel would open its doors, right? But here's kind of like the status of the Jews in Ukraine, just so you know what's going on and how you can support them. There were reports last week that a group of them, we were just in the Knesset a couple days ago, and MK Sharon Haskell was talking about, there's a lot of reports, Jews having to flee, reports of religious Jews having to flee on Shabbat, which is unheard of last Saturday. Thousands of Jewish refugees fleeing to the borders, a lot of them going to the borders with Poland. You have United Hatzalah, volunteer Israeli rescue and medical or like EMS organization here in Israel on the borders there to help with humanitarian assistance. The Jewish Agency, which is responsible for most aliyah to Israel, they've set up stations all along Ukraine's border, and they're receiving Jews. They're already flying Jews to Israel. Israel's preparing for at least 10,000 Ukrainian Jews to flee and make aliyah. And by the way, guys, we have good friends here in Israel, Rabbi Tuli Wise and the organization Israel 365, who is collecting money and they've already sent a lot of money to Ukraine. They're sponsoring flights for Jews to make aliyah to Israel. When Ukrainian Jews do land, they're helping them get set up, providing them with financial assistance. So we're going to have their link for their campaign in the description below if you want to donate to that cause. I believe 100% of it goes directly to the cause in Ukraine. It'd be a great way to join the efforts. Josh, in conclusion, the current situation and how Israel is related to the Ukrainian-Russian war going on. Israel is providing as much humanitarian assistance as possible. They're bringing as many Jews as possible to Israel. But at the same time, they're trying to keep this, tricky diplomatic relationship with Russia because who knows, those diplomatic relations could deteriorate very quickly, and it could even get worse than diplomatic relations because there are 10,000 troops, Russian troops in Syria, and they have, they're supporting Syria, and you got Iranian-backed Hezbollah also in Syria. So Israel has a lot to worry about, and they have to be very, very, very careful.
Guys, I got to tell this, though, that there's one very important Jew that lives in Ukraine that's making a big difference, and that's the president.
Yeah.
And I don't know if everybody knows that.
I'd say.
But we fully stand behind and support President Zelensky. And, what a guy. Like, he's just standing out right now as an incredible, fighter for freedom and standing up for his nation. But literally, the president is Jewish, and
he refuses to flee. He had offers from the United States to be extradited so that he wouldn't be in danger.
Yeah, he said, what are you talking about? I don't need a ride.
He's walking the streets with his bulletproof vest on. And
right. Well, he's a big target for the Russians right now.
Well, they've sent in henchmen to go take him out, from what I understand.
But you know what I really want to say is that what a guy that's literally standing up. He's at the forefront, literally, of this Russian attempt of world power. He's fighting it. And the Ukrainians are fighting against this force. And let's just say that if they're not successful in fighting against this force and holding them back from this,
the rest of the world is in danger.
This attempt of world domination, there's going to be serious there's going to be serious problems that are going to come from this if they're not successful. So we stand with them, and we just hope and pray that America and all these other nations, that Europe would finally just get some sense and stand with these people against this threat, this global takeover.
Guys, get the conversation going down in the comments below. We want to know and hear from you as to what you think. And let us know if you're praying for the people of Ukraine, the Christians of Ukraine, the Jews of Ukraine. Remember to tune out the fake news and tune into what is actually happening here in the land of Israel. We'll be back next week here at the Israel Guys. Hi guys, thanks so much for watching. Two quick things before you go. One, smash that subscribe button. Make sure you hit the notifications bell so you don't miss out on any more of our content. Secondly, if you want to help us produce more stories and authentic truth straight from Israel's heartland, you can do so at patreon.com/theisraelguys or at our very own website. It's theisraelguys.com. Both links are in the description below.